So,
Okay, so, yep,
sorry, I wasn't here yesterday. And it's on the live studio, but I only see it as a link.
I will send you a zip. So if you want to start from my code, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
What we're going to do is we're going to go day one blog. We're going to delete out our node modules folder. And then I will make a copy of this for you guys. Give me 1 second to share that in Slack. So if you are not caught up from yesterday and want to jump to my code, you are more than welcome to use this zip file. Live stream. Yes. I just sent a zip. What we're gonna do is we're gonna copy the blog project, the blog folder. We're going to make a new folder in week 15 called day 2. We're going to go ahead and paste in our day 1, our blog folder. And then we're going to take this blog folder and open it in VS Code. If you want to use my copy instead, you can take that zip file, drag it into your day 2 folder, and then double click on the zip, and that should open everything up in here. From there, we are going to right click on package.json. And remember, because we deleted the node modules, we've got to regenerate them out. So we're going to go into our terminal and run the command npm install, or if you're feeling a little lazy, npm I is the shortcut. I and npm install, npm I and npm install do the same exact thing. From there, we are going to npm start. That should fire up our browser and take us to the home screen. And you should be all caught up and good to go there. So review of the steps. We're going into our day 1 folder. We are going into blog. We're deleting out the node modules folder. Then we're right clicking on that and hitting copy. Then we are making our day 2 folder and either pasting in the blog folder, or we're taking the zip file and putting it in here. From there, we are opening this in VS Code. We're going to right click on our package.json, open an integrated terminal. We're going to run the command npm space I and hit enter. And then from there, we are going to run the command npm start, and then you'll be all set and good to go. Anyone needs any of that repeated or gets stuck anywhere, let me know. But if you have your home up in the browser, you should be good to go. I will also start a live share.
Yeah, sorry, mine just downloaded right now. So I have it in my week 15. It's week 15, right?
Week 15, day 2, yes.
Okay, so I have it in my week 15 folder and then just drag it and put it into day 2.
Put it into day 2 and then double click on the zip file, and that will unzip the day 2 into the zip file into the blog folder.
Okay.
And what file do we have to be in?
In VS Code, just open up the whole blog folder, right click on package.json and open an integrated terminal.
Thanks.
And then you're going to run the command npm space install. And after that's done running, you're going to run npm space start.
And what do I have to delete?
Oh.
Got the projector to work?
I think so. Oh, we got projection. Okay. You don't have to delete anything if you copied over day 1 to day 2 already. If you've got that blog project open in day 2 in VS Code, you're fine and don't need to delete anything.
Okay, great.
And once you see home in your web browser, you are all caught up and good to go.
Yeah, so I have a screen on my web browser
Mhm.
Oh my God.
with a whole bunch of errors compiled with problems. I don't know what that.
Okay. Go ahead, share your screen. Let's see if it's a quick fix to get you caught up. If not, I'm going to recommend that you use my zip file instead.
Okay.
Okay, so line 23 in post editor, you seem to have an error. So let me just request remote control quickly.
Yeah, I have to fix a bunch of stuff. Oh, there you are.
23. This should be, so we really got to work on your indentation here, because even though it's tough to stay up, this is going to cause you issues because we don't know if this let posts is part of the add post, if it's supposed to be outside of it. We really got to work on getting that indentation right, or leaning into having prettier fix things for us. So
Yeah,
that,
no, you're right. I had fixed this earlier or last night, and then today I hit backwards Command Z too many times, and it went back to this one instead of what I had fixed. It's really-
okay, let's see. I think that's all right now, and it looks like we're down to just warnings. Those are quick.
Okay.
If you have a warning in your terminal that says logo is defined but never used, and this goes for everyone, not just Jennifer, in app.js, basically what it's saying is we imported this logo, but we're not using it anywhere. So it's just saying, hey, go ahead and get rid of that if you're not planning on using it. That
Okay.
brings us to everything looks like it's working. So let me restart your server. And
Yeah, okay. It's good.
perfect. So you were only one step behind there. The only two things that were wrong were in post editor. You were missing the closing curly brace
Mm,
or the end of this add post. And then the only other thing that you had wrong was you had a colon here instead of a semicolon.
Oh, okay.
You
Thank
should
you.
be all caught up now. Does anyone else have errors or need help getting the project set up?
Yeah, so I have I opened package.js down at the bottom, the
Mhm.
terminal. What do I put in it? npm start?
npm space install first,
Oh, install.
because that's going to install React and whatever the other dependencies are. And then you're going to do, after the install is done, you can do an npm start.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else need help? Sure. Go ahead, share your screen just so everyone virtually can see it as well. Yes, so a cannot resolve React Router DOM is going to be either one of two issues. One, we didn't run npm install before we ran our npm start, or we didn't npm install React Router DOM. So switch me over to your VS Code. I can only see what you see on the. Stop it and reshare. Yeah. That's it. Okay, so it looks like we have our node modules folder. And because we have that, your npm install did work. It did install everything in your package.json, but we must have missed a step yesterday when we got started. Go ahead and give me a remote. what's basically saying what package.json holds for us is information about the project. And it's saying, hey, here are all of the dependencies. Here are all of the packages it takes to make this project work. You can see React is the major one in there. React scripts is what Create React app installs for us and gets working. But what we're doing in our app.js is we're importing something from React Router DOM. Well, we can't just start importing things from it. We need to install it before we import it. So I'm going to go down into your terminal, hit Control-C to stop everything. And yes, actual control, not command. Then I'm going to run npm install React Router DOM. And once that's done, I can go ahead and do my npm start again. And that should get us fired up. Good. Beautiful. Anyone else need help? Okay, couple reminders to touch on. Sorry for the rocky, unusual start here. Let me pull up the outline and we can do our stand-up quickly before we dive into any code. Couple reminders for you guys. There was a link that Karen posted at 8:30 last night, but our Hack Upstate workspace is set up to not allow users outside the organization to be able to see things by default. So that has been fixed. There is a feedback form in the W15D2 outline that is also posted in Zoom in the CIC student C4. If you in Slack, yes. If you go to Slack and scroll up here, there's a feedback form for the guest speaker for yesterday evening. That's a helpful way for us to know, hey, who should we invite back, what you like, what you didn't like. If you did not have access to that last night, that should be fixed. Just check this link or refresh it, either during break or after class. If you guys have a minute to fill that out, that is very appreciated. The other thing is right above it in Slack. This is a poll about Common Space memberships. We are going to reach out to the person tomorrow or contact at Common Space in order to get these memberships set up and need to run some budgeting numbers to figure out what we can offer you guys in terms of being able to cover the full amount or being able to sponsor the 9-to-5 membership or whatever is whatever we can work in the budget there. So please vote in this, even if you're not interested in a Common Space membership. Just vote in that last option. That just gives us a better sense of who is interested and how we can get resources out to you guys. So if you can vote in that by tonight, we'll be using those results tomorrow and trying to get those Common Space memberships set up by the end of the week. So vote in that if you haven't. Fill out the feedback form if you haven't. And then finally, a little break for you guys. Class won't be starting until 6 p.m. on Thursday. If you guys want, you can come in, the space is reserved, but we are asking everyone who can attend on Thursday to please try and attend. If you're sick, if you've got transportation issues, it's not a big deal. We'll be doing it virtually as always. But we have a couple members, not only from AEI, but from the mayor's office and a couple other places actually coming in to sit in class, kind of see how everything is going. So if you can make it in person on Thursday, that would be great. Like I said, not a big deal. If you can't make it or you have any sickness or any of that kind of stuff, please play it safe. But if you can make it, 6 p.m. on Thursday, we'll be starting a half hour later. You're welcome to come in earlier if you want, but we won't get started until 6. Any questions on any of that good stuff? Yeah. That's if you aren't caught up from yesterday's code, you can use my code instead of your own code. Sorry, I'm going to try and be better at repeating questions for the remote guys. The question was, what's the zip file in Slack? And that's just if you want to use my code instead of your code from yesterday.
Quick question. So for Thursday's class, are we ending at the same time or is it gonna be pushed back 30 minutes as well?
No, we'll still end at 8:30.
Okay.
I get sick of you guys around that time anyway.
We get tired. I think I can speak for everyone. We get super tired once
No,
8 o'clock hits.
I feel it too. I would not push a 9 o'clock class on you guys. Any other questions? Reminder, guys, if you are remote, please try and have your cameras on. Starting next week, you will not be counted for attendance unless you have your camera on for the majority of class. If you're in person, cameras aren't super important. I can look up and see you guys, but the reasoning behind that is as a teacher, it's really hard to know if this is sinking in without being able to see facial expressions, right? They've actually done studies to show that the human brain is actually architected in a way where we read facial reactions quicker than almost any other kind of object identification. This is a really good example of a rule that I'm breaking right now. My camera is here. I've got a second monitor over here. And so you guys, the human brain just naturally goes, oh, he's not talking to me. And a level of attention just drops, right? But as soon as I start talking to you directly where that camera is, all of a sudden your brain, whether you realize it or not, is going, oh, I gotta tune in there, right? And so if there is some reason why you can't have your camera on, just shoot me a Slack message. I'm sure we can work something out. And it's no big deal if you turn your camera off for a couple minutes to go run to the bathroom or something, someone sticks their head in the door or whatever. But if you guys can have cameras on for me, it just makes it much easier for me to see, hey, are things soaking in? Did I lose you somewhere? It makes it actually easier for you guys to ask questions because we feel like we're in a community together. So that will be required starting on Monday. If there are any reasons of why you can't have your camera on, like I said, shoot me a Slack message. We can work something out. But for attendance, which is directly tied to your stipend, we will be requiring cameras on just to gauge participation and engagement and all of that good stuff. Okay. Any other questions before we dive in? Okay. So I think a good way to pick up where we left off is actually going to be reviewing our code. And the reason I say that is because that's how I start my day. I don't start my day by immediately knowing where we left off. I start my day by trying to review, hey, what did we accomplish yesterday? And I know I've gotten feedback from a couple of students who have said, hey, leaving comments in line in the code is really helpful. The reason why I hit this home so much is because I've done lots of technical interviews at a lot of different companies. And one of the most common forms of technical interviews is them asking, hey, talk us through some code you've written. And what they're doing is they're not only checking your code quality, they're quizzing you on how well can you explain this code. Because you almost never work on code by yourself. You're always going to be working on code in some kind of team environment. And so being able to communicate something technically is almost as important as being able to write the code and being able to make it technically work as well. And so that's why it's so valuable to go through this and comment it. Not only is it a learning tool for you guys to learn the code and be able to not only write it, but to be able to, in English, recite back what it's doing. It's also really important to be able to do that to other people as well and be able to explain that code. Schneider. Yeah, I'll come to you. Give me 1 second, guys. Never mind, Karen's helping. Okay. So, we are going to get started kind of right at the top level of our code, right? So we're going to say, hey, we import the React Router DOM and our 2 pages. So I'm going to put a note in here. Number 1, import component pages from separate files so we can use them in the router. Then we come down here and we say, set up a specific type of router that can be used in the browser. And if at any point you guys feel like, that's not exactly how I thought that was working, or you have any feedback on that, don't be afraid to raise your hand or unmute and be like, I don't get that explanation, or I didn't think it was working like this, or that's kind of how I thought it was working, but this is how I have it in my brain. And the reason why we want to do that is I am not a know-it-all, right? There are times that you guys may have a better understanding of this, and you guys are all learning this much more recently than I learned it, right? So if there is something that clicks for you guys, don't be afraid to come off mute and throw something out. Okay, so now we come down here and we are going to say number 3, define the paths and components, elements that should show up at each route. In other words, we're tying the URL that's going to be in the browser with a component that we imported from step number 1 up here.
Can you repeat that again? That last
Yep.
part?
Yep, let me do a visual for it as well, because that may help. What we're doing is we're tying the path or the URL that's supposed to show up in the browser with a specific component that we imported from a file that's in our home.js.
Okay.
So we tie the URL in the browser to the component that's imported from a file.
Okay.
That is technically, let's keep that going because we're actually done in this file. That is in here. So I'm actually going to keep going at post editor because we don't have anything good yet in home.js, right? We just have a link to the post editor. So when we head into our post editor, we have a couple things. We've got some setup steps. Then we have to wait for some user interaction. Then when they submit it, we do something else. So I'm not actually going to start from the top down. I'm going to start with the setup stuff, which I guess is top down, but we're going to skip a couple things here. We're going to say number 4. And number 4, because I'm keeping the numbering going from our app.js. Number 4, set up 3 variables, 3 state variables, so we can store what the user types into the form. We haven't told it how it's storing it. All we're doing is setting it up right here. Then we come down here and we do another setup step. Number 5, set up navigate to, so when the form is submitted, we have access to the router. How do I know this is coming from the router? Because we import it from the router right up here. So I guess this is technically number 4, but for the sake of shorter documentation, if you're wondering where any function is coming from here, always check up at the top because that may tell you the answer to what package it is. So we come down here. This is some function. We don't care about it yet. It's a function. We don't run functions until they're called. So we skip over everything here. We come down to this return. We're like, okay, HTML, hold up. That's some JavaScript there. But that's only happening on submit. So what's the order that a user is going to interact with this? So we switch over to the browser, we click on go to post editor. The first thing they're going to do is click into title and type in some title. So what we're going to do is we're going to say number 6, when the user types into the input text field, update what letters they press into state.
Into the state title,
Into the state.
right?
Yes. So everything here is basically tying not only the value that shows up, but also when they type a letter, we use the set title. Where's our set title coming from? That's coming all the way up here from number 4 to sync everything that they type in into the state so that we can use it later. We'll see that in a minute. Technically, we do 6 a couple times. I'm gonna, for the sake of not having huge numbers, say 6B, 6A, and 6C.
So for every input on the ID for the class name. Okay.
The class name, this is just so Bootstrap makes it show up right. It's the value and the on change that are the particularly reacty parts of this code.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to do comments on the line above where they apply. I might not be always spot on with that, but normally when you read a comment, it's about the stuff under it, not the stuff above it.
Okay. Because I usually do it under it.
Yes.
Yeah, general convention there is to do it above it. So that way, when you read it out in English, then when you read the code, it makes a little bit more sense about what that code is doing. But that's not like a rule of programming written into the walls or anything, you know, it's just convention. Okay, so we've got our inputs down here. Now, finally, we say number 7, form is submitted. And I'm going to say 7A because this really triggers 7B up here. Form is submitted. Time to head to our JS function. Okay, they clicked the button or they hit enter. That is a type of submit. That means it's going to trigger the on submit up here, which is going to trigger the add post function, which is coming all the way up to right here.
At that point, does it then go to the local storage?
That we're going to get into that. Yes.
Not yet, though.
This is the function that makes it get into local storage. Yes.
Okay.
So what we do is we say this is going to be 7C. Form has been submitted. Run this function. So we get number. Let me put a number sign in there. Number 8. Prevent the form from refreshing in the browser, which is the default. Oh my God, Max browser, which is the default action. So that's why we use prevent default, because we're saying, hey, browser, we're going to take care of this. From here, we, number 9, construct an object with 4 keys and values. The first 3 are extracting the values in state, and the last key value pair is storing the current date and time into a key called timestamp. Okay, let's dive into that. We did all of the work to make sure our title, our tagline, and our content were all updated using these set functions whenever they were changed. That means now when the form is submitted, we can use those values down in the object that we have created by extracting them out of state and storing them in this object called post. Basically, all of these 4 pieces of information are all related to this one post. But we want that all in one variable so it's easier to work with. So we make this new variable called post that happens to be the type of an object. And then we put the 4 key value pairs into this: title, tagline, content, and timestamp. We happen to use a shorthand here. We don't have to do colon and then the word title again, because the key and the variable share the same name. But down here, it doesn't know what timestamp is yet. We don't have a timestamp coming from our use state or anywhere else. So we generate that directly using new date.
So we don't have to make a use state for that.
No, because the user, we never show this to the user on this page, right?
Okay.
This is a timestamp that gets generated when the post is made, and then it's done. If
Okay.
we wanted to show the current time and have it update every couple seconds to show, you know, the latest timestamp, then we would want to use state.
Okay.
Can you go back to 7B for a second, please?
Sure. Senator had a question before I do that of where does new date come from? This is a built-in JavaScript object. So just like we can say const or let or function, we can also use date, and then new is just a constructor for it. In other words, it's saying take whatever the current time is right now and make that a new object. Brandon, I think you said 7B.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's keep going here. We made our object. We got all of the information out of state. We do a quick log to check to make sure all the data, including all the form content and the time, are properly stored in the object, right? We want to make sure that this went right. The only way we can tell that is if we tell the computer, hey, let us in under the hood. Go ahead and log that out. From here, we set an empty variable that we can store posts in. We retrieve the stored posts from local storage. We check to see if there are any stored posts. And if there are, parse them from a string to an object, actually an array. Why do we need to do that? Because local storage is just like the internet. It doesn't like storing anything other than strings. And so what we do is we use JSON to parse out our object or array into a string and vice versa. So here, when we're pulling the item out of local storage, it comes out as a string. And so we're saying if there are stored posts that exist, take that string and parse it out into an array that's getting stored into the variable that we have on line 11. Then we come down and say else, and our else case is going to say, else there weren't any posts in local storage yet. So set our posts to an empty array. Then, regardless of whether or not our posts either came out of local storage or we started it as an empty array, we're going to say number 16, add in the object we created with all the form content included from state to the array. And I'm going to reference this. Add in the object from step number 9. we created to include to the array from number 14 or number 15. Then last kind of two steps we have here, 17, convert the posts array into a string. That's what the stringify is doing, and set that item into local storage using the key posts. Local storage needs to know, hey, you can set whatever you need in here, but I need to know where to save that into storage. And then finally, we're going to say number 18, use the navigate function from step number 5, which was set up navigate to. So when form is submitted, we have access to router. So we come down here and we say use navigate function from step number 5 to navigate us back to the home page using the router. Okay.
Question.
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks. Could you please give me a reminder about what router does?
Absolutely. So before we, whenever we made a new HTML file, I'm sorry, question in case you guys couldn't hear it, is a reminder of what does the router do? So the router, if we think about pre-React, if we go back to our HTML days, we could create any HTML file over here. And when we wanted to link to it, we would just use whatever that HTML file name was in our anchor tag, our href, we would get to it, we would be great. The problem that we run into, though, is that without the router, how do we get to post editor in React? And the reason why we need a router is because there may be some components that we create that aren't going to be their own page. They're going to be components used in other components. And so we run into this issue of, well, we don't want every single one of our components and every single one of our files to be a separate page. We also run into the issue of what happens if we have multiple components on the same page. How does the web browser know what to show? And so that's the point of the router. The router is what is allowing us to tie the path, i.e. the file name in vanilla HTML, to a specific component. So if for some reason we said, hey, we know we called this component post editor, but we don't actually want the URL that the user sees to be post editor. We want them to go to just /edit, but we want this post editor component to show up. We can do that. We can say /edit here, save it, and if we go over to the browser and change our URL to edit, we're going to get to that post editor. Now that may make more sense for us to call it post editor as the component, but to the end user, we may want to make that path that they use to get to it edit.
Yeah.
So while it seems like we're adding another step and making it a little bit more complicated, the flip side of that is that we get more control over it. And that's a common recurring theme in a lot of packages, right? Whenever we introduce more complexity, it's harder for us to use it, but it also gives us more freedom and control over how it works. That definitely is the case for routing. Routing is saying, hey, it's more complicated to set all of this up to make the element or the component or the file all kind of the same realm there. It's more complicated to make the component and then manually have to set up a path for it. But because of that, it gives us more control of being able to say, hey, these 3 components are my different files, my different pages, but within those components, we may have 10 other different components that that page or component uses and references and calls in that we don't want to give the end user access to individually. We only want them to be able to access these 3 components. Differ
Okay.
from the what? Yeah, so the import here is
What was the
just
question?
pulling it in, but we haven't told it which one to show yet. Right? If we just if we said, screw the router, we don't need a router. We've got our 2 imports here. I can just take my, oh, hold on, I broke things. I've got my 2 imports here. I'll just show them. I'll use my home and I'll use my post editor. So I save that, I come over here, and now I've got, that's surprising. That's really surprising. What? Oh. Boo, ignore me. Trying to make a point, and it does not want to let me make that point. Oh, come on. Oh, it's going to be broken on the link tag now. Okay, now we've got our home and our post editor showing up. And we're like, well, we just want our homepage to show up. And when I go to the post editor link, well, now I only want my post editor to show up. And so that's why we do it differently in our app.js. We use our routes in order to say, hey, when the path is set in the browser, this is the component that I want to show up. And that's what allows us, hopefully, to be on our home screen and link over to different pages. So React as a framework is called a single page application. React itself, without any additional packages, can only create a single page application. But oftentimes in web applications, we want multiple pages. And so that's what React Router does for us, is it bridges that gap and allows us to have multiple pages, multiple routes, multiple components, multiple elements that only show up at a specific path or URL that is in the browser.
So if
That
you
was
want
a
to
good
make,
one.
we didn't hear the question.
The question was, why do we need the router? Why can't we just use the imports here?
Okay.
And the basic answer is because if we don't have these routes on every single page, all of the components that we have in our app.js are always going to show.
Okay. So this is more like specific. It makes it more specific as to what you want them to see.
It allows us to have multiple pages or multiple components that only show up based off of what is the URL or what is the path.
Okay. So this would be kind of like let's say, for example, and using the project that we have, when you have a sign up sheet, when you have a sign in sheet or a sign in page, and then, but they are new web users or they're new clients. When they press sign up, that just takes them to, that's the path that you would use the router to take them to the sign up page or the
Correct.
create an account page. Okay.
Yes. So you would have, anytime you have a separate page, you want to have a separate route for that page.
Okay.
So you're going to have a login page, which is both going to be its own component and its own file and its own route.
Okay.
Now that route is going to reference the file that's importing the component.
Mhm.
So all three of those are tied together, but up here, this is the file. This is the component from the file, and this is the route that is tying the component that is imported up here to the path in the browser.
Okay, makes sense.
So if you think about our chat application, our chat app had a couple components, right? It had a text input where they could type it in. It had a sent message. It had a received message. It had the chat list. All of that's great, but we don't want message input to be on its own page. We don't want the user to ever be able to go to /messageinput.js and see just the input. There are times that we will have other components that we have made that we are using inside other components that have their own routes. So basically, this gives us control to say, hey, what pages, what routes, what paths should the user be able to get to? And based off of that, what components do you want us to show when that route is being used?
Okay.
Go for it.
So if someone's on a shopping list.
Yep.
And they're looking at, like, say, a grid system of all the different items.
Mhm.
So whenever they click on that one item, that's a different route. But it shows like just that specific item on the one page.
Hold that question. I'm not even going to repeat it for the virtual guys. Hold that question until end of class and then re-ask it. Because you're getting at what's in the lesson plan for tonight. What's that? Oh. Remember, think back to our blog project before where we only had 3 pages, right? But they could click on one post and we had one HTML file that would make all the posts show up, no matter if it was 1 post or 10 posts or 100 posts. We didn't have to make a new HTML file for that. We were able to say, hey, based off of that ID, go generate this HTML based off of which one they clicked on. We're going to reuse that thinking, but do it a little bit more dynamically using React. So that's what's coming up.
Like then bring.
Like I said, I like teaching this half of class a lot more than the first half, because this is where it gets fun for me. This is where I'm like, yeah, let's build things, you know, like not that we weren't building things before, but this is when the puzzle pieces start coming together. Okay, any other questions before we roll forward here? Couple minutes before break. Hopefully this is a good review for everyone. We feeling like the comments make it a little less intimidating, a little bit more doable. I know it's always like Roadrunner speed where you're just trying to type and keep up with it, but so important to go back afterwards, read through the code, make sure you understand it. And if you don't, that is a great use of stand-up time at the beginning of class, or a great time for one-on-ones to say, hey, you talk through this all the time. Can I try and talk through this code? Can I make sure that the way I'm understanding it is actually accurate? Because 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be yes, or you are very close and you just need that little tweak in order to have what you're saying be accurate, or you know, be in line with the way another developer would also explain it. Okay, we're gonna get to work getting our homepage working unless anyone has questions.
Would you be able to go back to the last couple comments? I just want to make sure that I have them down right.
Sure. And they are also in the live stream. So if you want to pull them from there, you can also do that. I think these were the last couple.
Max, you're muted.
Sorry, we were complaining about there's a high-pitched ringing in the room. That when I turned off the whole system, it stopped, and my ears were like, oh, thank God. But I don't know how to adjust it to get that to stop. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend. It is just a natural thing of. Wait, did I get it? No, it's still there. I forget what event I was at, but someone was like, I can't hear you. And I'm like, I've never heard that once in my life. I am such a loudspeaker that I'm like, sorry, it's my default volume. Yes. Oh, that's supposed to be it. 40. Oh, thank you. Throw 19 numbers out at me and I'll find one of them eventually. You can either have array number 14 or $15. Take your pick. Your numbers are line error 37, 52. It's about 50% they take on taxes. It is if you take the annuity and it pays out over 30 years. But if you take the lump sum, then it cuts your taxes in half again. Yep. Sorry, we're talking about lottery for remote guys. The problem is if you take the annuity, if you take the lump sum and then have financial advisors invest it, you're like 98% guaranteed to make a better return on the stock market than you would if you took the annuity over the 30 years. Yep. Which in our country, it's not likely to go bankrupt because it's heavily regulated and it's practically state run. Yeah, there's okay, we got 15 minutes. We're gonna get through the homepage. Sorry, getting us back on track. Talk about lottery during the break. Okay. So we did all of this work in our post editor. We got everything stored in local storage. We need to pull all of that out of local storage. But wait a second, we've done this before. So I'm going to go into my new window and I'm going to open up my blog from week 10, day 4. I will drop a live share link in if you would like to reference this, or you are welcome to pull up your own code from week 10, day 4. I would recommend you have both of them open because we're going to reference that code. So I'm headed to my index. I'm going to close that out. And I'm looking at my index and I'm looking at the JavaScript and I'm like, all right, get the item from posts. That sounds the same. That's going to be the same in React. Make this variable called posts. If there are stored posts, parse it. If there aren't stored posts, make our empty array. Great. But now I get down here and I'm like, ooh, generated HTML, an empty string. We don't generate HTML using React. We do that differently. And I'm going to come down here and ooh, this is all messy. And then I see document. And whenever I see document, that's a huge red flag. Anything using document anything should not be going into our React code. So I'm going to draw the line right here. I'm going to take my stored post, my let post, my if stored, parse it, if not, empty array it. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back over to my home page and I'm looking at this and I'm like, I only want this code to happen the first time the home page loads. If anything else is updated on the home page, if someone types in an input, if some new data comes in, whatever it is, I only want this code to run once. So because of that, we need a use effect. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to my home page. I'm going to import my use effect from React. I'm going to say, hey, this is happening in my JavaScript section. It's happening inside the home component. So before the return and after the declaration, I'm going to say use effect. And this time, because we're not making an API call, because we're not doing anything asynchronously, we don't need to make another function inside of this and call it. We don't need the async keyword. We can just paste in our code directly from our vanilla JavaScript. And hypothetically, this should be able to, for us to be able to see our posts. So before we go crazy on getting our posts working, we are going to console log out our posts. So I head back over to the browser. I attempt to head back over to the browser. I happen to be on my post editor page. This isn't where I want to be. So I'm going to click into my post editor and delete that out of the URL. And while nothing is showing up on the home page yet, if we look in our console, we have that last post that I happened to make at it's universal time. So we'll take care of that timestamp showing up correctly in a second. But this is the post that I made either yesterday or from earlier in class or whatever it is. If you don't have anything showing up or you have an empty array here, try going to the post editor, making a post, and then seeing if it shows up in your array.
Do you mind if you could just show us the code really quick? I don't know if it's posts or posts for console log. I know you put the link on there, but I have way too many windows open.
Zona, we can't hear you.
Really?
And that's probably on me.
Yeah, I was not muted. Can you guys hear me? The rest of you?
Mhm.
What happened?
Yep.
Oh, I know what happened. I was an idiot. Okay, now we can hear you. Sorry.
It's okay. I was like, I was not muted. No, do you mind just showing us the code? I know that you posted the link to the share link, but I have to way too many windows open. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. I always feel so rude to the remote guys when it's like, I can't hear you. And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's not that I'm ignoring you. I just don't know you're talking. You need help? Yep. Yep. Go ahead, share screen. So Alba's having a problem that when she loads the page, everything's fine, but as soon as she types in a text field, it instantly takes her back to the home page, and it's like no new post for you. Yep. So let's go to your on submit in your post editor. Yes, it is very much a no soup for you. Switch me over to your post editor code. And let's go down to the first on change. Set title, set tagline, set content. You got your type submit. Go up to your on submit. Your on submit is for add post. Okay, now scroll over a little bit. I think your navigate to the home screen, scroll down. Your navigate to, I'm guessing, is outside of your on submit function. I think you, ooh, hold on. Something ugly is happening. This should be add post is supposed to have all of this stuff inside of it. All of this code is only supposed to happen when they've actually hit the add post button. So what happened was you had your event default going on, but then all of this other code was loading the first time the page loaded. So now you should be good if you want to test. Okay. And if you pop open your console, you should be able to see the array that just got created. Yep. Good to go. Anyone else need help? Yes, Jennifer. Okay, I'll give you a second to get into Zoom.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got some errors and I'm just trying to figure out what they are. So line 9, I have a parsing error with an unexpected token. I don't know what that means.
Let me request remote. And so what we've got going on is in our use effect right here, what is supposed to happen when the page first loads is supposed to be inside of these curly braces. So everything that you copied and pasted over from our vanilla JavaScript is supposed to be inside of here.
Shoot, okay.
I think everything else should be good from there. You want to test and see if you can see your posts?
Let's see if I can find it.
You can just, from here, you can just open a new tab and go to localhost 3000, and that should pull it back up.
That's easier, yeah.
Okay, so we don't have anything in here, which isn't great. So let's go back to, sorry, one more. Where's your VS Code? Can you take me to your VS Code? Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, it's all the way over. Okay. So you've got your use effect. Oh, what happened to your return here?
Oh, crap. I accidentally deleted the return.
Okay, let me check your app and make sure. Okay, so you've got your routing right. In your home. Why is it not letting me switch over? There we go. Use effect. Okay, it's probably a little cranky that we don't have a return. So let
Yeah.
me just do a div with an H1 of home, and then we also had a link. Oh, get out of my way. LINK to our post editor. And that's something like new post. And then if we go back over and I refresh, I think this may be a different one you have running. So to be safe, I'm going to stop it and restart it
Okay.
and say yes on that. And now that's going to take us to the right port, hopefully. I thought it was 3001. And here is where we see the array coming out and your new post link is working. So you're all caught up. You can see that when you made that post, it's saving into local storage.
Yes, awesome.
Max, I have the same issue.
Thank you.
Go ahead, share screen.
I have the right code. I put the return on there. But I think it was an older page too. That just reloaded.
Okay, show me what's going on in the browser.
I have the same message.
Okay, but you're on the post editor page. We put that code on the home page.
I am on the homepage.
You're on the home page in VS Code. You're not on the home page in your browser.
Okay, so I have to put a homepage here.
Yep, and that's just going to be an empty slash. And then if you, no, not the word home, just an empty slash, right? Because index.html, yep. And now you've got an empty array, which is okay. Go to the post editor now in the browser. Type ABC into each one of them. Or 1, 2, 3, or whatever, doesn't matter. Yeah. And now, if you look in your console, you've got an object which should have everything in it. It's the next line down. That's the one that's coming out from line 13. And that's got everything in it that you typed in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So your code was all right. It was just a matter of being on the right page to be able to see the output.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm gonna do one more thing because I got you 2 minutes before we go on break. We've got our posts now. Our posts have come out of local storage. We're feeling good about them, but we've got some data that we want to show to the end user. Whenever we have any data, any structure that we want to show up to the end user, instead of using our .inner HTML and our document.getElement by ID and our generate HTML and all of that, instead what we're going to do is say posts in state and set posts in state is going to be equal to a use state that starts out as an empty array. Because we're using state, we also need to import our use state up at the top. So before anyone tells me I have an error that use state is undefined, make sure you've got your import up at the top. Then, instead of console logging out our posts, what we're going to do instead is set posts in state to the posts that came out of our local storage. We're going to stop here to go on break. We can't actually test this yet because we didn't really modify anything yet. That's okay. We're going to come back to that after break. What you should have is your use state up in your import. You should have this new line here that is setting up our state. And finally, you should have, instead of a console log, a set posts in state. If you've got all of that and nothing has broken in your browser, we can't see anything yet. We can't test this code to see if it's working, but If nothing is broken, then you're good to go on break. And I'll stick around for a couple minutes.
Something is broken.
Okay, Alvin's gonna go first because she's asked the question, and then I'll come back to you, Exona.
Okay.
So that's because you've created 28 posts. Oh, look at those time. Well, so the way you can fix that, two things I'll show you. That's what I want to check. So in post editor, you know what I think was happening? Because you didn't have the closing curly brace in the right spot, it kept on adding things to it while you were typing. So I think you already fixed this problem. But what I'm going to do is just clear out your local storage. And to do that, you just do window.localstorage.clear and hit enter. And now when we refresh this page, you'll see this is an empty one. And if we go to the post editor and just create one and hit post, now you only have the one post in there. So I think you fixed that problem, and just clearing it out was the right answer. Go on break if you guys have your code working. Be back at 7:25. I'm sticking around to help people. Exona's up, and then I'll come to you, Kalai.
I fixed it. Thanks.
Never mind, Kalai, you're up.
It was fine till till I edited at last. Now it's everything is gone, and both the websites are browser are having error. So
Okay,
When I
go ahead, share
scroll-
the screen. Let's take a look. Okay, so in home, it is mad about some curly brace. It may just be an extra one. Let me request a remote. I think this is as simple as over here. Here we go. You somehow ended up with two homes. The first home is up here. Everything looks good up here, but then down here, you've got an extra default and an extra closing brace. So if we take those out, that should get us back to normal and have our post editor and our home screen.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's just the copy and paste sometimes that you got to be careful of how, where does this copy end and what am I pasting it on top of?
Yeah, sure. Thank
Yep.
you.
Any other questions? How's the audio been for anyone who's remote? Is it better than yesterday, about the same as yesterday?
It's fine. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you guys 7:25. Any questions pop up over the break, or anyone need help on their code before we dive back into getting our homepage state working? Okay. We are gonna dive back in then. So before the break, we did all of our local storage stuff. We got our array, we put it in state, we set it, and now we've got to use it. So because we have multiple posts we're dealing with, we're going to come down here and say posts in state dot map. And when we're mapping over them, we're generating out what we want to show up for each individual post. And that is going to return out, and I'm going to stop here because this is all pretty familiar to me. If I go back over here and I look, I've got all of this already pre-made. So I'm going to copy this whole div, not the template literal backticks, just the whole div. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to paste that after my return. Now I've got some cleanup work to do because this is vanilla HTML, not React JSX. So wherever I see a class, I've got to make it a class name. We're going to deal with our A tag in a second to get that working. That's going to be the router. We'll come back to that. But we've got some work we've got to do here. We don't need these $signs. Because we're not using a template literal. That's just JSX. And in here, well, like I said, we'll come back to this A tag in a second. For now, I'm just going to comment that whole thing out. Hard body, thank you. Okay, so I saved that. I'm going to go back over to my browser and I've got an invalidate $B. Okay, let me refresh. So we got a couple things to take care of here. One thing that's happening is our post.date isn't working. So I'm going to go back to my post editor and I want to take a look at what object we put in there. We actually called it timestamp in this version and not date. So I'm going to go back to my home screen and say post.timestamp on both of these. It was not an intentional issue, but I'm glad that we were able to debug it. So now we've got our time showing up, and then I've got this $B showing up. So I'm going to go to my post tagline, and I missed a little $sign there. We need that $sign in a template literal, but because this is JSX syntax, we don't need it there. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I refresh. Everything looks like it's working. If I go to my post editor and say EFG, I have my A and my E showing up. But we've got two issues going on here. One is they're supposed to be in columns and they're not. The other issue is that I've got this warning around the key. So once we fix both of those, we're going to pause and poll and let you catch up. My first issue is I'm using some calls, but I don't have my row. If we look at our vanilla JavaScript, we generated all of this HTML. We put it in an ID called posts, but those posts were in a class row. So that's a pretty easy fix. We come in here and we say, hey, before we start generating out all of these different posts from the state, use a class name called row and take this closing div tag and put it after this curly brace. So again, we added a div class name row before the curly brace of the map, and then we put in that closing div tag down here. So I switch back over to my browser. Now I've got my columns working, feeling good about that. And one more thing we've got to clean up here. React, whenever we use a .map, wants us to put a key prop on everything that we generate from that .map. The reason we need to do that is so if any of this information changes, React knows which ones to react to, or in other words, which ones to update. So I'm going to go back up to my div because my div is the first thing that's coming out of this map. Wherever we put our key has to be on the first item coming out of that map. And I'm going to put a key on that uses the post dot timestamp. So I come back over, I refresh, that's got my errors cleaned out, and I've got my post showing up on my homepage. I'm going to leave the code there, and I am going to start a poll and give you guys a second to catch up. Looks like most of you are voted in on the poll, so I think you guys are getting it. I'll give you one more minute and then we'll roll forward here.
So I'm literally just doing the entire thing because I lost you.
Do you know where you lost me?
Yeah, it was at copying the div, so I'm trying to catch up.
Okay. So it's the div that we copy in. We change our classes to class name. We changed our post to post.timestamp because that's what correlates with what we did in post editor. Then we added a key equals post.timestamp onto our div class name col4.
Okay.
And then the last thing we did is we took this whole set of curly braces and we moved it into this new div class name equals row.
Okay, so at the top. Div.
And I think that's all we did. Oh, yeah. And then wherever we had curly braces that we were using for the template literals, we took out the $sign from before that.
Okay. So take out the $signs.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see what it looks like.
I promise you do get better at converting HTML code into JSX syntax. It is a little tricky, but the reason why we spend time doing it here instead of rewriting it from scratch is starting next week, you're going to have your capstones, which a lot of you guys already have some HTML done on. So next week, we get to focus in on class of you guys having time to convert that over, start pulling in React features, maybe start adding some interactivity. That's where we are headed towards next week. good to move forward? Anyone need a screen share?
Yeah, I do.
Sure.
I don't know if I did this right, but I'm just gonna show it.
Go for it.
So this is my error.
Okay, posts in state is not defined. So let me request remote control. I hope it's not as simple as saying it's posts in state. Nope, that's not defined either. So let's see, set posts in state, set posts in state, and posts in state. Okay, now let me refresh to clear everything out here. Now we don't have any errors. So let's go to our post editor. I'm gonna make an A, a B, and a C and post it. And we don't have anything showing up. So I'm gonna go look at here. We're pulling it out of local storage. We're parsing it. We're setting it. I don't think any of that is a problem. One thing that I'm noticing is you set up your div here, but all of the posts that we generate out should be inside of that div.
Okay.
The other problem that we have is we need the word return here, because whenever we map over it, the return is what's making all of this be returned out where these curly braces are.
Okay.
So I'm going to save that. And now we've got all of our posts showing up. Only one thing we got to clean up. We've got a $sign there. So I'm going to go
Yeah.
find a stray $sign right here and take that out. And you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Go for it, share screen. That was to Artrell, sorry. I know you guys can't hear in person. Share screen first. Okay. Okay, so what I think the problem, let's see, got our opening curly for home. We do appear to have your closing curly. Why is it mad at you? That closes out fine, so your return is fine. What is unexpected dot on line 21? Oh, there you go. Seriously. Because oftentimes it's the line above it that's causing the error on the line below it. No problem. Anyone else need help? Okay. Now's where the magic begins. This is where it gets a little bit different, because what we had in our old version, I'm going to comment this A tag back in, was we had this read more button that shows up. And the whole point of that is if we click on that, we go to a new page that has the details of this post. So we need to make that page. Before we can link to it, it's generally good practice to have that page created. So in our source folder, I cannot say this or stress this enough, it has to be in our source folder. So I'm going to right click on SRC and hit new file, and I'm going to call that post.js. Now in our post.js, I need to have my const post, which is going to be a functional component that returns out a div with an h1 that says post goes here. Then I'm going to come down and export my default post. In other words, I need to export it so I can use that somewhere else. Again, please make sure that post.js is inside your SRC folder. From there, I'm going to split my screen so you guys can still see what I typed out. I'm going to go to my app.js, and just like I imported my home and my post editor, I'm going to import my post from my post file. And the last thing I'm going to do, again, new post.js file in src. We type this code in it to make our component. We say that's a function that's going to return out a div with an h1 in front of it, an h1 inside of it, I should say. We export it so that when we come over to our app.js, we are able to import it. And after we do all of that work, what we can do is set up a new route. So I'm going to create a new route with the path to the post. And that's going to use an element. And the element it uses is going to be our post. Pausing there. We can't test this yet. It's not working quite yet, but I want to give everyone a second to catch up there. We add a new route at the bottom of the routes. So in my code in app.js, it's line 6 and 18 that we added, and then the entirety of post.js.
Sorry, in the app.js, all you're doing is,
Line 6 and 18.
okay.
We
And then,
import it from the file, and then line 18 is we use that component that we imported to route it to the path.
okay, do we do anything in post editor? Sorry.
No, nothing in post editor, nothing in home yet. No way to test that this is working, but we shouldn't have any errors in your console. Anyone needs help, let me know.
Yes, please, Max. I don't have anything in my console when I looked at it just now.
In your terminal or in your console? Console's in the browser, terminal's in VS Code.
Things in the console.
Okay, that's okay. As long as there are no errors in the terminal. I may have misspoke.
Mm-mm.
So you should be caught up. If you've got post.js, if you've got the import in app.js, and you've got the route for post, then you're good to go.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Alba ran into this earlier. The question is, how do we clear local storage? If you wanted to, I only have 2 posts here, but if I wanted to clear out my local storage, I can go into the console inside the browser and type in window.localstorage.clear. don't forget the parentheses at the end, because what we're doing is executing a function. But when we hit enter on that, it will look like nothing changed and give us an undefined. But when you refresh the page, it will actually have everything cleared out. And then we can always go back to the post editor, make a new post, and have it show up.
Cool.
Ooh, I missed a class somewhere. Here we go. This is supposed to be a class with parentheses at the end. Yes. Window, I'll put that in the live stream. Window.local storage.clear. Nope, console is okay to be blank at this point. Only because I made a new post. If I refresh the screen, it won't have anything. Console. Oh, oh yeah, no, that's not good. Share your screen. Okay, so post in state is not a function on line 20 of home.js. So let's go to home.js in VS Code. And you're gonna have to restart your screen share. If you just do it with desktop 1 or desktop, well, you only have one desktop. So if you just do desktop 1, I'll be able to see everything. Yep. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we've got your posts in state, and it's saying the problem is it doesn't know what to do with posts in state. And that is because up here, we set posts in state to an object to get started. We don't want it to be an object to get started. We want it to be an array to get started. And so if we save that and go back to your Chrome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. No problem. Anyone else need help? Go for it, Jennifer.
I'm not seeing a card with an outline on my page when I make a new post. Is that not supposed to happen yet?
You do not have Bootstrap in your index.html. That's in the public folder.
Thank you.
I noticed it before. I was going to wait to see how long it took you to notice it was off.
Yeah, I was just looking at it going, oh, wait a second.
How about go ahead?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's this for? The token for what? You know what you use the tokens for? Like, did you use it? Yeah, but the personal access token was probably something you use with Nathan, not something that's related directly to the student pack. I would say let it expire and let's see what happens. It's not going to be a problem to regenerate it, but if my gut is right, it's something that you set up with Nathan so that your GitHub account had access to what repos you uploaded, and not actually with the student pack itself. But if it does end up being an issue with the student pack, I wouldn't worry about it right now. So there was a question for everyone remote of you guys got an email about a GitHub personal access token, sometimes called a PAT, expiring. And I don't think that that's directly related to the GitHub student pack. I think that that's related to maybe something you did with Nathan, where you had to give another service access to your GitHub account. So I don't think that's going to cause any problems. But if it does, we will deal with them as a class when they happen. Any questions on the code before we keep going here? All right, we're in the 7th inning stretch. We're almost at the finish line for tonight. Push over it. Can't believe I just used a sports metaphor. I hate sports. Okay. We set up our post editor page, and I can go in here and I'm looking in my home.js. I'm sorry, we set up our post page. That's what's over here. And I'm looking at my A tag and I'm like, this is React. We shouldn't be using an A tag. We should be using link, which we already have imported from our React router DOM. So I'm going to reuse that. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change my A tag to a link. And then I'm going to change my href to a 2. And I'm going to say I want to go to my post page. And then I need to also change my closing A tag to a link. So all I changed here was the A tag to link, the href to 2, and then the URL to /post. And the closing A tag to a link. So I come over here to my browser, which has decided to throw a fit on me. Shrink down. There we go. And I have my read more, and I click the button, and I get post goes here. Okay, well, I look at my post, and I have my post goes here, and I know all of my routing is working because I got to that right page. Now the problem becomes I need to know what post to show up here. Is it my first post that has A and B in it? Or is it the next post that has E, F, and G in it? So I click on read more. I need to know what post I clicked on in here to know which post to show in here. Now, before we did that with something called a get parameter, which you guys now have more exposure to after Ryan's class. We put in this little date and we said the post.date is what's going to tell our post page what page to get out. However, the router has that built in. We can use that as something called a route parameter. We don't have to put it in the question mark in the query parameter. We can use it directly in the route. The way we do that is we're actually going to convert this to a template literal. And when we use a template literal in JSX, we've got to put it in not only the backticks, but also curly braces. We are going to say, take me to the post that has the post.timestamp in it. So I go back to my browser. I'm on my home screen and I click on read more and I get this lovely white screen. And I'm like, well, wait, I just changed my 2. Where's my post goes here page? Well, down in the browser, it's telling me no routes matched location. Okay, that's not really too surprising. I need to go back to my app.js and inside the route, tell it, hey, you're going to get the timestamp. Now notice we put a little colon here. That colon in our app.js on our post route is telling the router there is a dynamic piece of information that's going to be coming into this route. So in app.js line 18, we added a /colon timestamp. And then in our home.js, we added this to, and we changed it to use curly braces so we could use our template literal. Then we put in our post.timestamp. And if all of that is working, when we are on our homepage and click on read more, we should still get to our post goes here. Anyone need help with that? The question is, what does the colon signify in our patch? So if we said post editor /new/post, the URL would be literally looking for those 3 pieces of information. But because we put this colon in it, the router now knows, hey, that's going to be a dynamic thing that gets passed in. That's going to be the actual timestamp or a number or whatever it is. We're going to store that in a special variable so you can get access to it. And we're going to see how we do that in a second. But what this colon is signifying is it's basically saying, don't look for the word timestamp. Look for whatever part of the route has that colon in it, has that, and store it in something called timestamp. Yes. We'll see that play out in a second. So if we actually look at our URL, it has post in it. That's lining up with our post of the path here, but then it has this long timestamp as part of it. So if we look at that, all of that is going to be accessible some way. And that's what we're getting into next, which is also hopefully queuing you up for your question from earlier. Anyone need help? Yeah. This is one of the hardest classes we have in React. So take your time. If you don't understand what's going on here, slam on the brakes now and ask the question, because if we get to the end, it takes a lot longer to figure out where we lost you. So don't be afraid to ask questions, even if you think it's a stupid one. You think it's a stupid one, chances are someone else has the question, and therefore it's not a stupid question. I do believe in stupid questions. I just don't think there are many of them. And I just saw a message that tonight's outline is not in Canvas. That is my bad. That will be fixed in 30 seconds. Whenever you can't get to an outline in Canvas, this is a little pro tip for you guys. You go up to the top and go to our schedule and YouTube links, and then scroll over to whatever week you're looking at. This is week 15. The outline is linked right here. So if you click into that cell, you can click on it, and that will get you into the outline, even if it's not published on Canvas. But that should be published now. Okay, so now we've got this timestamp up here. We need some access to that timestamp inside our post page. The way where you do that is we're going to go into our post page. I happen to have this in a this separate tab over here. I'm going to import something called use params from React Router DOM. And now that we've got that imported, I can say const params equals use params. And then I can console log those params out. Params are what we call the colon over here as part of the path. It is a parameter that is part of the path in the URL. So I come back. Oh, go ahead.
So with an M at the end, not an N as in Nancy.
M as in parameters.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yes, with an M. M as in Mary. What that's doing, we look, the timestamps in our URL, but if we look down here, we've got this object called timestamp, and it's got the information that's getting passed in the URL. So if I change this and I make the timestamp 2024 in the URL, look what we get coming out of the console. So I'm going to try and explain this. Oh, this is going to get messy, but I'm going to try and do it anyway. Okay, I've got all 4 files open that we've been working in so far. I've got my app.js, my home.js, my post editor, and my posts. So what happens here is a new post gets created right here in the post editor that creates the timestamp that contains the current date. We then go back to the home page, which generates out all of this HTML, one of which is a link to a post route that includes the timestamp that's coming in that got created from our post editor. When we click on that link, this too lines up with this path right here because it includes the post, but it also includes the timestamp that got dropped into the link from here. Because of that, it now takes us to the post element, the post component right here, that uses the params from the router that we're using from over here, and it gives us access to the params. What's the param? That's the timestamp that's getting dropped in from here that's coming from here. It's all of it very pretty diagram. I don't know why you could ever have a problem with that. All right, let's start that again. We generate the timestamp when we make a new post. Then when we loop over that post on the home page, we use the same timestamp. Then when that link gets clicked on, the router knows to use the timestamp pass because of that special colon. It passes that information into the post file, which then can go to the router and use the parameters to get out the timestamp information. We aren't really doing anything with the timestamp yet. That's not the point. The point is that this is very complex code that is in 4 different files. So what we want to do is be able to articulate that and say, how is this working? How are we using parameters? How is it that when we make a new post and that post shows up on the home page, that we can click on that post, know which post was clicked on, and make that right information show up in post? We haven't done that last part yet. We haven't made that information show up in post yet. But we've done all of the legwork in order to make the information from post editor show up in home so that app knows which post to route to so we can get that information in the post. One more time, feel free to interrupt me at any point. When we make our new post in the post editor, we make this thing called timestamp. Then back on the home page, when we're generating out all the HTML to show up, we use the timestamp that came from our post. Then when that link gets clicked on, the app.js router knows, hey, post lines up with this post here. Because this is in a colon, it has a colon before it, it knows to line up with this timestamp as part of the link. Because of that, we go to the post component, which is right here. That post component then pulls out the parameters from the router, which gives us access to the timestamp that we linked to in our homepage.
And that all happens to take us to the post that we select when we click that link in the home.
You got it. And what that means, to take you one step further, you are right. What that is doing is making it so we can make one page called post.js. And no matter how many posts we make, it will always take us to the post page that's going to show us the right information.
So it's all reusable code, it looks like.
Yes.
I get it. I just wish I got more of it.
We've got one more project after this one. Okay, let's do our final push. We've got access to the parameters. We've got to wire that up to make that post show up. Because we want that to happen when the page first loads, we're going to use a use effect. Don't forget your comma and your empty array down here at the bottom. That's going to tell it we only want this use effect to run the first time the component shows up. Because I used autocomplete, VS Code was smart and put in this use effect. This import for us. So what we need to do is say, hey, we need to go to local storage. So we're going to say const stored posts is equal to our window local storage get item posts. And because this is the last file we're working in, I'm going to close out everything else so we're not mortified by the number of lines of code we've written for this project. Okay, then we're going to say our posts are equal to our JSON.parse stored posts. Once we get the stored posts, let's just console log them out and see that they're coming out. So I come over here and I've got 2 items in my array. Okay, so what I need to do is find the matching post by going through all the posts and finding a post where the post timestamp equals the params.timestamp. I've written that code before, but that's always a doozy, right? What we're doing is we're saying, go to the posts. Where do the posts come from? They come from our local storage. Go find one of them. Well, how do we find them? We go through all of the posts and we get access to each individual one. Once you find that once you have access to the individual one, find one where the timestamp of all the posts that we're looping through equal the timestamp from the params that are coming from the router. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You mean debug to figure out why it's not working? Just raise your hand and ask for help. Share your screen. So the question is, if this isn't working, how would I fix that? And my smartass answer was, raise your hand and ask for help. But the other answer to that is you got to figure out where it's broken, right? And 9 times out of 10, the right place to start with that is an error message. Do you have an error message? So Alba said, check in the terminal, see if there is not only the error, but the file that the error is in and the line number it's in. You might not have that. So you might need to go to the browser and check in the console and see, hey, is there an error in the console? That will have the similar file name, line number, error message. And over time, you do get better at saying, okay, what do you mean cannot read posts of undefined, right? And you start learning, oh, that means I reference posts somewhere, but I don't have the place where the data is going into the post. That's a very specific example. The worst error is an error that has no error message with it. When you're just sitting there and it's a white screen and it's not working and you're like, why isn't it working? So that's when you start backtracking in putting console logs in. So you start saying, all right, I put a use effect in. Before I even got to my use effect, I have a console log params here. Let me go see, that is post line 6. So I'm going to go to my console. I'm going to look at my post line 6 and I got that information. So it's working at least up until that point. So then I'm going to go in my use effect and I'm going to just say the most common console log you're going to see is something that just says hit. And all we're trying to do is seeing if the computer is hitting that line of code. So we come over here, we look, and I got my hit coming out from post line 9. So I'm like, okay, it's working to that point. So I can keep on going here, keep on adding in console logs. Oh, sorry. It just logged out the word hit, right? And so we're like, okay, that got it. Oh, wow, I didn't realize that was all cut off down there. Sorry. So it logged out hit. I know it's making it to that line of code. So I could keep on adding in console log stored post, console log post, console log matching post. And when I see that it's not working at any one of those console logs, I know that it's that line right above it that isn't working. So oftentimes when we're trying to find errors, when we don't have an error message or a line number, we have to add in more console logs to tell the computer, hey, we need to see what we're telling you to do to see if it's actually working. And that's actually a great question because that's what I'm going to do right here. I think I've got the matching post, but I have no clue at this point. So what I need to do is console log out the matching post. Before I do anything with it, before I make it show up in state, before I change my return, all I want to see is the computer is giving me the right post. And what do I get? I get undefined. Okay, well, that's not what I wanted. So let's try and come up here and I'm going to say, all right, let me log out the params.timestamp. So I do that, I come over here in line 11 where I added my console log, I do have that timestamp there. So I know that's not the issue. Maybe the issue is with my post.timestamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to console log out all of my posts. I come over here, I'm looking only at line 11. I open that, and my posts have timestamps. So that's not the problem. What did we say about our dot map before? Someone had a bug where it wasn't outputting anything of the map. That's because we missed the keyword return. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back over here, and now we still have an undefined and I look like an idiot. Let's put in our console log posts. And we're getting both of them out. So let's say post.timestamp and also log the params.timestamp. I hate everything. All of that's working. And I'm like, why is it not finding a matching post? Because I don't have a time machine and I don't have any posts in 2024 when I change the URL to prove a point. So I'm going to go back to my home screen and I'm going to click on a post that does exist. And now on my line 15, you can see I've got the matching post for this timestamp or this, ABC. If I go back and I click my EF post, I get EFG coming out. When someone invents a time machine, please let me use it. I've got a lot of stuff I wish I learned along my programming career. Okay, I'm going to take out my console logs here because it's not good to leave console logs in your code. It's good to clean things up. And if someone else were to read through this code or a user would open up the console, there may be some console data in there that you don't want to expose to the user. So you want to clean up your console logs there. We're at the finish line, believe it or not. We have some data that we want to show to the end user. We know we don't use inner HTML because that's a document. What we use is our state. So we're going to come up here and we're going to say our const is going to get a matching post. It's going to get, I'm just going to call it post at this point, and set post. That's going to start out as empty because we haven't actually matched a post yet. We're going to come down after our use effect and say, if there is not a post, return a div with an H1 that says post does not exist. No, the empty array in the use effect is saying run this use effect when the component first mounts. In other words, only run this the first time the component shows up.
So I'm guessing it's going to be a little, put something in there, it would check and see if that thing runs or.
I will answer that question in 1 second. I think I have a good example for that, but I will show you. Now, because we have our matching post, we can set our post from state based off of whatever the matching post is that we found. I've got an error down in my terminal that use state is not defined. And I'm like, what do you mean it's not defined? That's coming from React. It's coming from, I only have my use effect up here. I've also got to put my use state in at the top. And the very last thing we need to do is just show what our post is in our return. So I'm going to put I can delete out my post codes here now and put in my post.title. And in, I don't know, an H3, put my post.tagline. And finally, in my p tag, put my post.content. I'm going to save that. I come back over and I have EFG. If I go back to my home page and open, I've got my ABC. Or Trell, did I answer your question? Everything is in post.js. That's any relief to you guys. You make sure you've got set post matching post on line 14. So I'm going to talk through this code as you guys are working on it. This is it. We're done for the evening. If you get this working, you are done with the blog project. Until homework rolls around, you are done after this file. Starting from the very top of this file, we import two things. We cannot use a use effect or a use state until we import them from React. We also import use params, so we are able to get the timestamp information from the URL into our own code. We define a new function called post. That is our component. We then have two things that we set up at the top. Our use params, so we get access to the parameters in the URL. Again, that's the timestamp. And we set up something called post and set post, which is going to be a new variable in state. Then we say, hey, there is some code that should run when the component first shows up. That's our use effect, and that's our 15. On line 15, we've got this empty array here. That empty array is saying only run this code when the component first shows up. From there, we've got to do some work. We get our item called posts out of local storage, and we store it in something called stored posts. We then parse that information out because anything that comes out of local storage is a string. Now we've got access to the array called posts. The problem is this is all of the posts, and we're trying to find the post where the timestamp from the URL parameter lines up with the timestamp on the post in the array. So what we do is we say, go to the post, and the way you're going to find the right post is giving me access to each individual post. And I'm going to compare the timestamp in each individual post with the timestamp coming from the parameters from the router. Once I find that matching post, I'm going to take that matching post and set it into state. The first time this runs, we haven't found the right post yet. So we say if there's not a post, return post does not exist. However, once this code runs and we've found our matching post, we can skip over this if statement and return out the three pieces of information that are stored in that post from the array, which are now getting set into our state. So because we set our post, our matching post is now going to get stored into this post here, just like this post lines up with this set post here. Because it is in our state, it is going to automatically update the three pieces of information here. This post is the same post here, here, and here, which means it connects to this matching post here, which connects up to our find here, which connects up to our JSON that's getting parsed from the stored posts in our local storage. I am glad I've left you ample time to ask questions about the most complicated piece of React code we've ever written. 2 minutes is plenty of time. I don't know what you could have. Do not worry. You may have noticed I did not put comments in here. This is something that's going to take you guys a while to get. And so tomorrow we're going to come back into this code. We're going to add comments into it. We're going to make sure you've got understanding. We're going to pick up at whatever number we left off at and go over this code again. We're not going to be writing it from scratch again, but we are going to go through, make sure you've got that understanding. What are we trying to tell the computer to do? Most of this lesson is built around learning routing and learning how we can not only make routes for our individual components, effectively creating their own pages, but also understanding that we can make one component like post that gets reused no matter what the data is. So Artrell asked earlier, how does it work when I'm on Amazon.com and I'm on the homepage and I do a search for running shoes and I see that product, but then I do another search for candlesticks and the page looks exactly the same, but has different information in it. That's what we're going for in this post. That's what we're saying. Hey, we could make 1,000 posts. We're still only going to have 4 files: the app, the homepage, the post editor, and the post page itself. That post page itself could be reused across 1,000 different products on Amazon, but that product is always going to show up based off of the timestamp in the URL. We only layer on to the complexity of this project. It doesn't get any more complicated than this in the front end. We've got an entire database and an entire back end. So that's why we're going to spend time tomorrow, not only doing our terms, but spending time going through this and making sure we understand it.
Four different issues, but they have a lot of different reasons.
Yes, Artrell used the analogy of like it's having 4 different dishes, but the dishes share ingredients. It is exactly that notion, right? Of, hey, we've got this data, right? And no matter how widely different the products are, every product is going to have a product name. It's going to have a product image. It's going to have a bullet point list of the description. It's going to have a price. It's going to have a shipping time, all of that information. No matter how many, I'm sure there are millions of items on Amazon. Every one of those millions of items has a price, a title, a description, an image, availability, whatever else, right? And so that's why when you go to Amazon.com and do a search, you're always going to get that same product page. Now, sure, an ebook may have a slightly different product page than a piece of running shoes, right? That's fine. But there are, even though those are very different products, half the page may be identical, but the other half of the page may be different. That's what React sets us up to do, is allows us to reuse our components and then modify them based off of the data itself. Okay, I've kept you 2 minutes over break. I'm going to stay around for a couple minutes because I know that this was a complete mind. I have no other word to use for that. Yeah, mind fudge. That's it. This is total mind. What I would just like to say though is, unless you are really stuck somewhere, review this tonight, let it simmer, and bring questions in tomorrow, because this project, while we're done writing any new code, has a lot in it that we want to make sure we're understanding. Does anyone feel that they've got a super pressing question that they can't wait to ask?
No.
Is anyone here not feeling the full mind fudgery that we went through tonight?
Feeling it. Totally.
This is it. This is as complex as it gets on the front end. You do another project where we practice this. We're going to work on your portfolios, but we're not doing that until we feel like we've mastered this code. We got halfway through this with comments and we were feeling good. We're trucking up. We got number 3 in here. We go to our homepage. Our homepage doesn't have any comments in it yet. That's okay. Our post editor does. We got all the way up to number 18. We're going to pick up at 19 tomorrow, and we're going to make sure we understand this. Do not let imposter syndrome kick in here. There's a lot of code. We're going to get to the point where we're going to get everyone functional, and then we're going to take it one step further, make sure everyone understands it. That's what's headed your way tomorrow. Sorry for running late. We will definitely go a little bit slower through posts. I wanted to get us over the finish line so tomorrow we can get into levels of understanding. And I will answer your timestamp question about, or not timestamp question, your question about the empty array tomorrow. Yeah. Have an awesome night, everyone. I will see you guys tomorrow, 5:30. Class is 6 p.m. on Thursday. Tomorrow it is still at 5:30.
Thank
See
you.
you guys. Have an awesome night.